Kevin is commonly considered really our country's top cyber sleuth, and is truly, to me, probably the most unassailable and highly respected individual in our country, respected by both the private sector and the public sector, and all things around the issue of cybersecurity. So it's been an honor to work with him on Mandiant. It's great to have him up here. And let's get into, you left the military,
yes,
and you wanted to start a company. I know you did a brief stop at Foundstone, but let's get to the starting of Mandiant.
I did 5 years in the military and had the privilege of responding to computer security breaches for most of those 5 years. And at that time, it was government on government. When we responded to a breach, we ignored the attractive nuisance of a drive-by shooting on the information highway, like a web defacement. But we were investigating what I attributed to Russian government hacking our military, .mil, or the Chinese government. And it was a fun job, and there was no training at the time, so you'd read the manuals, and all the intrusions were Unix-based intrusions. Right now, everybody's heard of Microsoft Windows, but back then, all our weapon systems were designed with Unix machines, Erix machines, HP, UX, and all the fun stuff, SCO. And they did have manuals for those, by the way. So got to respond to a bunch of breaches, and then when I went into the private sector, they wanted training, so it was a perfect fit for me. At some point in time, what I witnessed in the private sector was all the government on government breaches started going government against the private sector, and all the safeguards you could buy, the McAfee, the Symantec.
It's foreign government against the private sector.
Foreign governments against our private sector. It wasn't us hacking us to steal our secrets. That's absurd. It was the Russians and the Chinese primarily. When we saw that tilt, that's when I knew it was time to start a company with the core competence, so let's respond to every breach that matters.
So who were the first few people you brought along with you when you first got started?
Real technical people. I started an office in Alexandria and realized our premise in 2004, when I started this company in February of 2004, the premise was security breaches are inevitable. And I shared that with a Gartner guy, who's still a Gartner guy. And he said, I won't tell you his exact words, but he basically said, you're wrong. And it's a terrible premise for a company, is that security breaches are inevitable. And I think that's widespreadly accepted. I didn't believe it as much as the reality showed, but what I wanted to do is give people a number to call. If you've had a breach and you know it, give us a ring. But you couldn't get funding for that idea.
Eventually you took some money, though. You took a little bit.
We did. We made in a way it was a mistake, but we were profitable since we started in February of 2004. We were profitable to 2011. When I met you, Ted, in 2011, and it's no coincidence we were not profitable right after I met Ted. We were doing about $35 million in revenue with a $10 million EBITDA, and then the year I met you, we did $53 million in revenue with almost $17 million in EBITDA, which is weird for a company that bootstrapped building software with services. But the first round I took was from a college friend, and I felt like taking it because it was time to build software, because that was really the goal. I couldn't get backing for my idea because I'd never proven myself. I was a military guy, didn't really try, and I had a premise that wasn't supported by facts. Security breaches are inevitable. Let's respond to every breach that matters and learn what bad guys are up to. So the first round I took did two things to stunt my growth in a lot of ways, because we were profitable anyway. Great guy, college buddy, but what it did is I didn't have the bona fides to get good legal counsel during my whole growth from year 1 to year 7, quite frankly. I kept getting regional auditors and regional legal counsel, all of them kind of expecting us to fail and managing us somewhat in that way. So it was a big difference getting a reputable international investor involved, because immediately, suddenly, PwC was willing to do our audits, and we could get a better law firm and legal counsel. But I did take an angel round from a college buddy.
I think you also never really spent any money you raised.
That's correct.
Right. You're never not profitable.
And when we did raise, 7 years later, it was a secondary to buy out the angel round, quite frankly, because we were going to hit a ceiling at some point in time.
We're going to talk about scaling in a second, but let's getting back at the very beginning. You had the original group were a bunch of technologists, and then you added on some people to your team. Who did you add? Who were like those first sort of, call it 5 significant hires after that core team, and how did you pick those folks?
So it was easy. So when I started the company, everybody learns that you write a business plan. I never wrote a business plan. I actually went out and got customers right away, and it created a lot of fun. But I wrote down 31 names exactly. Here's the people I need to make this company work for what I call phase one, the best technicians that could answer the question, what happened during a breach and what to do about it. They were nerds. They were, we can collect data in a forensically sound way. We can analyze it and tell you, what to do about it. The second round, because the day I sat down in May of 2005 or May of 2006, it might have been, I told the first 11 employees, hey guys, I got a great idea. We're now going to build software. Almost nobody wanted to do it. I got emails like 99% of all software companies fail or whatever the stats were. Nobody wanted to build software. So I knew I had to take some of those technicians that were the loudest, move them out of the company. And all the guys I brought in were untested though, but they were the ones that did better than me at whatever schools I went to in the military. So I hired all Air Force guys.
So let's talk about some of your hiring mistakes then. As you started to build the business.
Yeah.
First of all, I think when we invested, you had no marketing executive. I don't even think you had a salesperson at your company, even though you were doing $34 million in revenue. So,
yeah.
And then you started hiring and building and everything. What were some of the bigger mistakes you made, and how did you correct for them?
I think every startup might hire a VP of sales too soon. I think we did. I hired a good friend of mine, again, from the military to be a VP of sales. When the product wasn't done, all the cliches turned out to be true. That product takes twice as long. I was always struggling on how to manage engineers because I'd never done it before. And I always managed people to, if they said they were going to do something, that's all I could do is take them at face value and make sure they did what they said they would do. And we were having trouble making deadlines. Every expert I talked to that had managed huge software companies said they always missed deadlines though. So it was strange for me being a services guy with a services background where you under-promise and over-deliver to deal with a whole core of our business that would under-promise and then be late and then late again. And they would be setting their own deadlines, missing them, and then have no consequence. But I guess that's how engineering works. And I never figured out how to manage it, other than sell their stuff and force them to deliver for customers. That works.
You did something that I think this group will find really interesting, which had to do with, this will sound a little bit mundane, but it's something you guys deal with all the time, option buybacks. And we wrestle with this as a company. I point this out because you're unique on how you dealt with this, but everyone's got employees, they have vested options, and a lot of times they want to try and monetize those vested options, and it's an issue. I think it's an issue in the Valley. But you had a pretty unique solution to this. Why don't you describe what you did?
The genesis for that solution was my angel round basically I couldn't get more stock from this person, get more equity grants to my key leadership. So that actually created this challenge, is that I needed all the equity I could get. And at some point, because I had an angel round that didn't understand, East Coast angel round, didn't understand that, hey, we need to dilute over time and really reward these people. I took 35% of my stock and pledged it to the company, and then I was pledging my stock to the employees because I couldn't dilute, which I thought was a problem. That means equity was very critical to the organization. So every time an employee left, we had the option to buy back their stock at more than, obviously, a 409A valuation. And we didn't exercise it every time, but certainly if somebody was going to...
But if somebody went to a competitor,
right, we certainly
they actually had to sell it back to you.
Right. But there was times we had, the challenge we had is as we got bigger and we got to 500 people, legal was telling me, oh, you gotta, you have a precedent that you don't always buy back, and it was becoming a challenge to manage through. But we even had some folks who did 7 years at Mandiant and then went to a competitor, and I felt 7 years invested time, they deserve the upside of you
did a very good job at keeping the shares of the company with the company over time, much better than I'd ever actually.
But that's because I had an experience of a board that was inexperienced and it didn't let me dilute and award people appropriately. I could show them statistics of proper equity grants, and it just didn't move the needle.
So you scaled this company. I think we're going to get to the sale of it in a little bit, but I think by the time you sold the company, we were doing over $100 million, if I remember right. But if you now, with 2020 hindsight, looking back during that scaling time, what's kind of the biggest mistake you made and you wish you did differently?
Ted, tough one. You know, we did services and we did product. And there's always a lot of friction when you have a whole bunch of experts running around solving problems and then, you know, product team building, you know, engineers. They scale different ways. I think that probably the biggest thing for me was I felt Washington, D.C. had the technical competence to build great software. But as I looked at the way we were funded, self-funded, we were competing with, our ideas had then proven fruitful. We were dealing with companies in the Bay Area that raised over $100 million to build software that would compete with ours. What I learned was we were taking such great pride in Washington, D.C. at Mandiant that we built everything. Wow, we're 10 times faster than the U.S. government. And we'd pat ourselves on the back, being 10 times faster than the U.S. government. It's been my observation, it might be, they're 3 times faster in the Bay Area than the East Coast in building software. And the minute I realized that, yeah, that was the mistake.
Okay, so I want to move into big bets.
Yeah.
You made one bet that I would call your biggest bet. Maybe you disagree with this, but if I don't know if you all remember, it was 18 months ago, maybe 24 months ago, maybe it's even longer than that, where on the front page of pretty much every publication around the world, there was an announcement of what was called the APT-1 attack, where Kevin and Mandiant gave positive attribution to the Chinese in a particular building and a particular group in the Chinese government for this attack. It was the first time we as a country positively identified the Chinese, and you decided to do that. You decided to go public. Not that we didn't know, not that you didn't know this for years, but you decided to go. Why?
Well, there's confluence of a lot of factors. And then after we decided to go public with it, then I asked permission.
That's true.
From the board. Ted, sorry, but the toothpaste is out. I think there's a lot of reasons, but at the time we were about 400 employees, 150 of them were former military. This was very important to them. We were not a global company, so we didn't have to worry about risks or repercussions to the perceptions that a global company might have to worry about. But the final straw was, we had about 8 reports done, by the way. So we picked the hacking group in China that was the worst at hacking, because we knew we'd withstand any repercussions if they came after us. So we picked PLA Unit 61398 out of Shanghai, because they're not very good at what they do, but they get better every day because they have unfettered practice every day, no risks or repercussions. But it was the President Obama speech. In February, during the Chinese New Year, the president did a State of the Union and said we need to do something about gun control because of terrible events in Connecticut. The second point was need to get more jobs, because that's every State of the Union, we need more jobs. And then all of a sudden he talked about cyber espionage from China. I went, oh God, it's coming to a head. Let's just get this thing out there, and maybe it'll be a useful tool. But I didn't think anybody would care. That was what surprised me. I went to the office the next day, just like it was a normal day, and then ended up doing 13 TV interviews, which was weird, because it's cybersecurity, and it's hard for me after 22 years of doing it to gauge a layperson's interest in it.
All right, so now looking back on that decision,
right?
It kind of vaulted the company into a new spotlight. So.
Well, yeah, at the time we did it, we had a sales engineer and maybe a sales guy. I mean, I really don't remember. We had a couple salespeople. We had 5 people in marketing, and nobody had heard of us, but we were probably the largest security company no one had heard of, so it did help. That.
Right. So you'd make the same decision again?
It got made in many ways for me. It was a moving tidal wave. I mean, my people really wanted to do this. But at that time, it was at a very heightened, the private sector was kind of fed up and saying, can the government try anything, non-technical, anything at all to help us out?
Let's talk about that, because you spent a lot of time in boardrooms briefing boards of directors on their cyber issues and what's going on inside their companies today. Quite honestly, you and your group respond to almost every major hack or breach that takes place, certainly in this country and now a little bit more around the world. Crisis management. These companies end up in a crisis mode. Right. Because you've seen it so many times, what have you seen them do about it? What's your advice to them? Right. How have you seen them screw that up? How have you seen them do it well?
Well, first, it's never easy. When I look at, if you've been breached and you know it, in 2014 became the year everybody knew it. You couldn't disclose on your own terms, which is kind of, with every crisis, if you have to tell people about it, you'd love to be able to do it on your own time frame. with your own content. You get your arms around whatever the incident or crises might be and tell people. For some reason in cybersecurity right now, could be because of what's going on in Ukraine, could be a lot of other ideology differences with us in the East, particularly Russia. But a lot of times if you're hacked and you know it and it's the Russians behind it, they're telling Western bloggers and Western reporters about it. So your organization will find out you're compromised the same day the world finds out. And that's a headache for you. And we got we got to watch Target deal with this, and good Midwestern values. Target was breached, and they had this, the truth will set us free, which I think, quite frankly, everybody believes that, and they disclose. But the difference with Target is they disclosed during an ongoing investigation facts as they emerged during a holiday, and I think that that ultimately hurt them, kept them in the press every day, and they were caveating everything appropriately, but they'd be like, we think we lost 10 million credit card numbers, and then 3 days later, it's 40 million. What we've learned is disclose only what you know, don't disclose what you don't know, and if you can disclose on your own terms, embrace that in cybersecurity anyway, because it's a rare thing nowadays. And what I mean by your own terms is you get your hands around the incident before anybody else knows it even happened.
So now that we're doing a little bit of a good job of scaring the audience here, let's try and give them a little bit of hope as to some advice on what they might be able to do at their own companies to try and ensure their own security. And let's not just repeat the mantra, you're going to get breached, so you're screwed.
No.
So let's try and help them out.
I can just tell you what I say at a board is, if you make cupcakes for a living and you don't accept credit cards and you transfer that risk, why do you need a high cybersecurity posture? To me, it goes back to protect what matters most for your company, whether that's operationally. We're Campbell Soup, and we use computers to manufacture 10 million cans of soup a day. You don't want those machines to be compromised. But it could be a business process that matters most to your company. The data that it stores could matter most. The applications, how much money those applications make. The customers that use those applications, or it could just be people in your organization where it's an intolerable event to lose the CEO's email to a breach. So you got to pick what matters most and secure that. And for every industry, that's different. So I'm still dodging it, but there is no one answer. It's a risk-based decision. If you're a utility, you don't want to be shut down by a breach. It's that simple. That'd be a bad thing.
So then I guess the follow-up is what you said earlier. If it's going to happen to you, make sure you answer straightforward, only answer what you know.
Right.
Don't do it in a progressive manner, trying to kind of do it all at one time. Give them the three things to do if they're going to get breached.
For small to medium businesses, I'd outsource as much as you can. I think that there's just not enough security people to help secure small to medium business, and I think that's where most of you are. A breach can be a cost the company issue, so the more you can rely on outside expertise, the better. But for the enterprises like the banks and all those folks that want to do it, right now the biggest bang for the buck, I can nerd out with 4 things. We responded to 226 breaches last year. 90% of them, the breach happened because of what's called a spear phishing email. Somebody got an email saying, hey, click on this link, you've been invited to have drinks, or whatever the email was. The email either had a link to something bad, or it had an Office document or a PDF document that could put something on your machine. Many of these companies are getting breached the second time, but failure to detect or prevent that spear phishing email, the detection efficacy that you've been breached goes down exponentially if you don't detect the first inning of that breach. So if you can detect spear phishing, now you have to worry about Skype phishing and IM phishing, but at least right now spear phishing is the targeting being used by both the Russians, the Chinese, and hackers and other safe harbors. So that's the biggest bang for your buck right now. Well, I know if you can be hacked, you will be. There's a bunch of automatic programs going out just scanning for vulnerable systems. You want to prevent that as best as possible. I think what we're witnessing, like Sony, it's the realization there are no risks or repercussions, quite frankly, for intrusions. I hate to say it. There's nobody really, if you hack in the United States against a U.S. company, you do get caught, and there's penalties for that, and there are risks or repercussions. But if you hack from North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, just keep doing it.
So
do you believe, I think it's the realization.
Do you think private enterprise should be able to fight back?
I think it's very dangerous. I think that will not have the desired outcome, and I have 7 reasons why. I won't bore you with all 7, but I can bore you with 2. I can tell you this, it's asymmetry in cyberspace, and most people don't get that, but I'll explain it this way. In November of 2012, on Thanksgiving Day, I get a phone call, it's a bank. 10 minutes later, another bank called me. Next thing I know, I'm on a conference call, FBI for the 4 largest US banks. And it's because the Iranians were doing a denial of service attack, and they're nice enough to announce it. Hey, we're going to try to do a DDoS attack, distributed denial of service against the banks. And we're thinking it's probably only 2 people behind this, and it's creating work for 100,000 IT people. That asymmetry is recognized by North Korea and Iran, where they recognize they can't, if there's armed conflict somewhere, the best domain for them to fight in is, quite frankly, cyber, because they're not going to beat us with bullets, but they can have one person, and you only need one good hacker in North Korea to create pretty good havoc here. And I think we're going to see that more and more as we have geopolitical issues.
How good is our country at dealing with a crisis like that, in your opinion?
It's hard to know what the right answers are. I hate to say it. So I'll answer it this way. In 2008, the whole defense industrial base was compromised from China. The whole defense industrial base knew it was. If you talk to any of the big defense contractors, yep, China has hacked us, they're taking our IP. But they also do business in China. They manufacture things in China. So it's the hardness of the issues are there are companies being violated by a government entity hacking them, but we don't want to have a big discussion about it because potentially 50% of your growth is going to be in your Chinese-based markets. So tough issue. And that's why you can see as a country we don't have, I can tell you what we are doing as a country is we're making the liabilities to you if you get hacked the same if a 15-year-old hacks you or a nation state hacks you, and that one we got to sort out because if we don't figure that one out.
I know you and I could spend a long time on that one. I want to bring back one more question that I actually forgot to ask you about Mandiant itself. The climate that we're in, the winds are all at your back. Why'd you sell the company? What led to the decision? I mean, look, you get they offered us $1 billion. It's probably now worth about $1.5 billion. Put the numbers aside. Why did you sell?
We were great at some things, and well, there's a couple reasons. The model of our company was we budgeted a profitability every year, and in the West Coast, the budget process is different, especially for venture-funded companies. Let's put it that way. So it's okay to spend $5 and make $1 in some regions when you're investing in growth. At Mandiant, the investment in growth was an unnatural act. It's just we had grown up with 7 to 8 years of profitability, and we could sit through the meetings, and we just weren't going to overinvest in growth. It's just that's the way it was. And yet the whole marketplace, cybersecurity became a marketplace. And we were competing against companies where we'll spend $4 to make $1 in California this year. We're going to do that. And that just didn't come natural to us. But that being said, we believed we were the right solution, right answer, and we needed to adopt a new philosophy of it's okay to go to land grab mode and mark your territory ahead of time.
Do you look back and regret the sale at this point, or it's tough because
there's everything that I set out to do can still be done, and that's not a party line. I still believe that, but it's not my pet baby I sold, by the way. We just wanted to be the best at what we did, but you'll always wonder, could we have done it? But I think that the mentality of my company wasn't. I can tell you this. Years ago, we met with the biz dev folks at a Fortune 50 company. And they're like, we want to buy you. Fine, let's show up. Let's have the meeting. And the first question they asked, and there was like 10 dudes on that side of the table, and I was on this side, was what's your exit strategy? And I just burst out laughing. And that's not funny to any of you, but it was funny to me because I'm a cybersecurity guy. This is what I did, and I had a business person saying, well, when you started the company, how did you figure out you'd end it? And it didn't even make sense to me. Now, in hindsight, I recognize it's okay to start a company knowing how it will exit. And if you take funding, you better sort that out. But we were an unfunded organization for 7 years. We could have kept going for 20, 30. We were profitable. Yeah. I didn't have an exit strategy. I really didn't. But I looked around at my team. Another reason why we sold is risk profile was different. We had some people that had made a lot of money, some people in the inner core that had not, and we couldn't create alignment as a lot of offers came in. And I shared, every time we got an offer, actually, I don't think I shared them all with the board, Ted, sorry. And I think I might have, there's a little gray area as what you got to share, what you don't, but if it's in writing, sure we would. But I always shared them with the inner core of the team, and I could see
Was it one higher than the one we got, just out of curiosity?
It's a good question. It was apples and oranges to compare the two. But the long story made short, I could see it as there was a time where we got to a size where we were in people's crosshairs to be acquired, and my team, part of them were ready. At the end of the day, they were ready.
Okay. I'm going to do a last one with you here, which is I'm going to make you give 30 seconds on the top 4 cyber hackers in the world. It's by country. And I just want you to give your analysis of each one of them.
50 seconds. The best adversary that we have to worry about in the United States, and a lot of you will be global companies, is definitely Russia, because when they break in, they immediately just get rid of their malware. They know they do counter forensics, and they do it well, and the Chinese don't really focus on counter forensics. So
okay, I was going to do Chinese next. So
well, and the Chinese though can operate at a much bigger scale than the Russians. There's no doubt about it. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised if there's over 1,000 companies compromised by Chinese cyber espionage. That these people are in uniform hacking the West. It's probably up to about 1,000 right now. Nobody knows the answer.
But you're more scared of the Russians over
the Russians are just harder to combat. But I can tell you this, a little tidbit to end with. In 2014, after 20 years of responding to the Russians, it's the first time I saw them change their rules of engagement. And we got to witness this at a couple places. Every time we caught them in the past, they would just go away. In 2014, it was the year we'd catch them in an intrusion, and he just came back every single day. So to me, that's a big deal.
So Kevin Mandia built a company based on the motto, find evil and stop crime. He built what is the most successful cybersecurity incident response company really in history, and built an entire career on this. And as a citizen of the United States and a member of the world, I thank you all. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ted.